And I've titled my sermon tonight, Are You Submitting to Cultivation by Jesus? Our lives are a garden that God is getting His hands into. He's getting His fingers dirty, working in us. Some of us, I know myself, some of us put a little more dirt on His hands than others. But God is actively, intentionally, decisively cultivating our lives. There is a process He puts us through. It's not like we get saved and then He just makes us little Jesuses running around. He's got a process where He takes a brand new Christian who becomes a disciple. And if you're doing it right, you become immediately a disciple. We know this. Jesus didn't say, go make converts. He said, make disciples of all men. So we start this process of walking with God, partnering with Him, like the original disciples did, and learning about life, and letting God work in us, changing us from the inside out. We'll pick up in Matthew 7, starting in verse 15, and really get into some of this cultivation process. Starting in verse 15. Watch out for false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they're ferocious wolves. By their fruit you'll recognize them. Do people pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Likewise, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree can't bear good fruit. Every tree that doesn't bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus, by their fruit, you'll recognize them. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only he who does the will of my Father who's in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name drive out demons and perform many miracles? Then I'll tell them plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers. We'll pick up on that last sentence, or the last two sentences in a moment. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall because it had its foundation on the rock. Everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like the foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. We've got some pretty vivid imagery here that Jesus is using. In first century Palestine, most people were farmers. They grew, and most of them were subsistence farmers. They grew what they had to eat. They didn't make enough to sell it and make a profit and be a large landholder. But most people knew the intimacies of agriculture. I know when I was growing up, my dad always had a garden in the backyard. I remember he had this hand plow that he pushed. Had two handles on it, this old iron wheel, and the plowshare in the middle. And I remember the sound it would make. He'd stand he's a big tall guy, 6'2". He'd take that thing and just whoosh, whoosh in the sand. And I remember that we'd always have a couple rows of tomatoes under my bedroom window, and the other part of the backyard, it's a little narrow plot. You put some corn, maybe some beans. And I remember, man, the beefsteaks that you grow in your backyard are so good. The people Jesus is talking to here were really intimately acquainted with agriculture, with growing crops. Grapes, figs, olives were main things that they had. One of the things that we find Jesus picking up on in this reference to fruit, whether the fruit on the tree was good or bad, is whether the person is doing what Jesus is telling them to do. The key word is do. Jesus is telling us that obeying His instructions, doing what He tells us, is what gives us structure and solidity to our lives. His words are the unshakable foundation that our lives are built on, but only if we're doing what He tells us and not merely listening. Now, I'm assuming most of y'all are experienced in the faith, but we all know that we have to be reminded of it. Peter tells us in one of his letters, writing to the church, he's like, I know that you guys know the Scripture. The things I'm telling you, you're intimately acquainted with it. You're already living it out. But it is always good to be reminded of this. We need to have that voice in our ear telling us every day, this is the way we should go. Because it's easy to get off track. We all know. We've had enough experience in life. We find ourselves wandering this way and that way. How can we look at our lives? How can we tell that our lives are built on that foundation? We can look at the first parable in verses 15 to 20 for that rubric. The fruitfulness of our lives, whether we're producing good fruit or bad fruit, is how you tell. And not only does it tell us, but it's telling everybody else around us. If I'm screwing up, if I'm living a life that doesn't reflect Christ, I may be the last to know. Everyone else will know before me even. Because the people that know me best will see whether or not I am who I say I am. Since the good fruit in our lives is what we're looking for, how do we ensure that we're getting that? The answer to that we find in John 15, verses 1 through 8, in Galatians 5:22 and 23. It's called pruning and cultivation. And that's the work the master gardener does in us. Are we submitted to the cultivation work Jesus is doing in our lives? The first part, doing, is paired with relationship, not merely listening. That's what's necessary in God's kingdom. Lip service by itself is inadequate. We've all known people that they talk a good game, they show up in church, they're all hallelujah and praise Jesus and God bless you. But when you run into them in the grocery store, they're really rude to the clerk, or they stiff the waitress at the restaurant. The people that know them best always, you mention their name and they roll their eyes and, oh my gosh, that guy's a real jerk on the golf course. Or if they're working a job, you talk to their coworkers and you get this impression that they kind of leave stuff for everybody else to do. I've run into those people myself. They talk a good game. They say all the right things, but they're not doing what Jesus has told us to do. And it shows up plainly. The fruit isn't there. We see Jesus mention that in chapter 7, verse 21. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only he who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. There's a component of action that is non-negotiable. Are we doing what God's Word tells us to do? Are we willing to change our minds about something that the Holy Spirit is convicting us on so that our actions change as well? If the Holy Spirit tells me, James, there's something you need to adjust. You're not quite right in this. My only correct answer is, yes, Lord. And then I adjust. Now, it's not like God's some big giant bully. He's got all the power, so he can set the rules up as he wants. And when you screw up, he just knocks you in the head. He made this life. He made this world. He knows how it's supposed to be. He knows what is genuinely best. I can trust him. If he says, James, you should do this and not do that, I can trust him. I can take him at his word. I've had just enough experience in life to see that when I did it his way, results speak for themselves. I can't argue with the results. It just works. When Jesus says, do this way, it works. He knows what's best. Now, on the other hand, on one hand, you've got people that they talk a great game, but they're not doing anything. You got other people that are doing a whole lot of stuff, but they don't have a relationship with Christ. Their faith isn't genuine. It's just a list of do's and don'ts. It's just a bunch of action, but there's no relationship. They don't actually know Jesus, and Jesus doesn't know them. In verse 22 and 23, Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name drive out demons and perform many miracles? Then I'll tell them plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers. That word "knew" in English, in the Greek, it actually implies and even demands intimate relationship. It's like when you have your best friend, somebody you've known since childhood, who knows everything about you, stuff you don't want anybody to know. All those stories from when you were young and stupid, like when I was, that you don't want anybody to hear about, they know those stories. That's the kind of intimate relationship Jesus is referring to here. This is not just acquaintanceship. This is not, I saw your name on a list somewhere. This is not, you put a check in the plate, I recognized your initials. What he's talking about is a partnership, a companionship in life. You're walking together through every intimate detail, good and bad, Monday through Saturday, not just on Sundays. That intimate relationship, when you pair it with what you're doing, that's where you get the kind of bond with Christ that he's looking for, that he's offering. That's where we find that we're not the ones he's talking about here. Lord, Lord, did we not do this? And he says, I didn't know you. If you know Christ, and you pair it with the choices you make, the actions you do, that's what God's talking about. That's what he's getting our attention about. Now, when we're doing that, if we've got that relationship and it's paired with the good things we do that honor God and bless people, we start seeing fruit. And the fruit doesn't lie. If you've ever gone to the store and you go and you're looking for a cantaloupe, pick that joker up, you're feeling for how heavy it is, you smell the end of it, it smells really sweet, the color's good. You're pretty certain when you get that thing home and cut it open, it's going to be good cantaloupe. It's going to be sweet, juicy, the color's right. It's so good. My favorite way, you cut it up in little bits and put it in a bowl, get it cold in the fridge. It's like candy. I love that. The fruit doesn't lie. If you're in the grocery store and you're looking at the tomatoes and you pick a few tomatoes up and put in the bag, and one of them had a bad spot on the bottom, you look at that and you're like, okay, I ain't taking that home. That's going back. The fruit doesn't lie. If it's good fruit, then everyone else around you, not just yourself, but everyone else around you will see what God is doing in your life. There's fruitfulness. Are we seeing that fruit? And everyone else around us, are we willing to be honest with ourselves and ask ourselves the hard questions? Give God permission to dig deep, to lay a finger on this or that. Again, he knows what's genuinely best. We know this. We've experienced the goodness of God. We've seen the work he's done in our lives. Are we still willing to let him lay his finger on this or that or something else so that he can adjust and so that he can cultivate and tend to it so that the fruit is there? When we see that fruit, we see something related to it in verses 24 through 27, the parable of the wise and the foolish builders. If I'm seeing good fruit in my life, storms of life are going to come, and I'm going to stand. I'm on a firm foundation. The rock is what I'm attached to. The wind will blow. Life will bring circumstances that are difficult and trying and make me question what's going on. And I'm wondering, God, why is this happening? But because I've got a faith that's producing fruit, I'm also attached to the rock. That foundation is holding me steady. Might lose a few shingles. Might have to repair the shutter when the storm's done. Might have to reset the door. But the walls are solid. There's no rain inside. My life has shown that because of what I've given God permission to do, I'm standing strong even when everything else falls down around my ears. I've walked that road. I know what it's like to cry in the middle of the night because I have no idea what's actually happening. And the questions I'm asking God, it seems like they're just bouncing off the ceiling. But because I had given God permission to work in me, to cultivate, to get his hands dirty, to tend to the roots, I stood strong. And when the whole scenario was done, I was able to look back and see what he'd been doing in me, and see the shaping and the molding he'd been doing, see the protection he'd offered. I was able to see the times where when the storm was blowing its hardest and the house was just shaking around my head, he held me in his arms. We've been there. We've seen that. Now, I've already kind of given away the clue, the final punch. God's the master gardener. And he's not done with us. If we're still breathing, if we're still alive on this earth, there's more tending to our soil, pruning to our branches that he wants to do. Have we opened our hearts continually? Not just what he's done in the past, periods of growth we've seen, but now. Are we seeing God tend to us, cultivate us? Or do we need to give him permission again? Do we need to ask him to dig his fingers into the soil that surrounds our roots? When I was doing my study for all of this, I came across a really good description of what the farmers that grow grapes do. Grapes take a lot of work. You see a bottle of wine on the store shelf, or you see the bunch of grapes in the produce section. That produce took a lot of work to get it to the shelf. Grapes don't grow easily. They have to be in the right soil. They have to be on a slope facing the sun. It takes a lot of careful tending to the soil itself. You can't have soil that's not got enough nutrition to it, but if it's too rich, it'll harm the plant as well. When they plant grapes, they cut them back almost entirely the first 3 years. They don't let even hardly any branches at all come out on, because they want all that strength that would be put into putting branches out, putting fruit out, to go into developing deeper roots. Something I didn't know. They don't want any grapes from brand new vines. They want them jokers putting deep, deep roots into the soil. And then after the vines have matured to the right age, they'll let them grow and put out branches. Every branch that doesn't have any grapes going up, of course they're going to cut that off entirely. They don't want the sap going into something that's not being productive. It's a waste. And then after harvest, they cut them back entirely again. Pictures I saw, it looks kind of odd. Grapes are harvested, and the farmer's happy, and all his vines are just sticks in rows tied to these posts. There's nothing green on them at all. They do that because grapes don't grow on anything other than first-year branches. If you let a branch from this season last till next season, it won't put any grapes out. So they have to cut them back in order to get grapes. It's a lot of work. I don't know if I've got the stamina to be a grape farmer, to be a vintner and put it on the shelf there in the grocery store. That's the kind of work that God is doing to us. He He's tending to the soil, making sure that the right nutrition is there, that we're on a slope facing the sun, getting the heat and the warmth of the sun. He's pruning us back so that our roots go deep. We don't need weak roots. We've got a lot of fruitfulness to do. We need deep, strong, well-placed roots. So there are going to be times in our lives that He cuts us back really sharply. And it's painful. It hurts. But He's forcing our roots to grow deep. And then at His time, when He says, okay, now it's time for you to put fruit out, He's still going to be cutting away, because there may be this area or that area of our lives that aren't being productive and fruitful. We don't need that. And then after we've produced fruit, He's going to keep pruning us again, because He wants us to always have fresh growth on us. That new growth that's putting out the grapes. Big, sweet, juicy grapes that when you bite into them, they taste good and they're good for you. You know what? What's fruit for anyway? It's for being eaten. In Galatians chapter 5, give me a moment to flip over there, if you'll join me there. Verse 22 and 23. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against these things there is no law. Something really interesting that I learned when I was studying. In 22, when it says the fruit of the Spirit is, that word in Greek is singular. It doesn't say the fruits of the Spirit are love, joy, peace, patience, and kindness. It says the fruit, singular, one fruit. There's actually only one kind of fruit we're supposed to be putting out. That's Spirit fruit, who happens to have the flavors of love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. So all these things that Paul lists there, it's not that we get to pick and choose which ones we're going to put out. We don't get to say, well, I'm really good on love, but I'm not very patient, so I'm just going to leave that alone. If you ever saw me driving on 27, you'd know I need to work on that. All of the things on that list are the flavors we're supposed to see in our lives. It's one fruit that tastes like all these different things. And there's a reason why we're supposed to be putting these flavors out, is because there are people in this world that are lost, that don't know Christ, that their lives are bitter. All they've tasted is hardship, trouble, turmoil. Some of it may be self-inflicted. Some of it may be circumstances they have no control over. But all they know in life is bitterness. If you're putting out love and peace and patience and kindness and gentleness, and you're around somebody who's always in bitterness and hardship in their lives, it's going to be shocking how sweet your behavior is for them. They may react to it because they may have convinced themselves that this sour nastiness I've been dealing with all my life is good. You ever had a bag of salt and vinegar potato chips? A really good bag of salt and vinegar? You take that, you open the bag up, and I can say this because this is what happens to me. A really good bag of salt and vinegar potato chips. It's sharp. You take that first chip out, I don't even get it on my lips. I feel a shudder go through my jaw because the vinegar is so sharp in it. Well, those of us who haven't known Christ, who haven't experienced the goodness of God, that's what we're tasting every day. That sharpness, that it just puts your teeth on edge. And you get used to that. And you start thinking, well, this is how it's supposed to be, so this must be good. Until you run into somebody who's loving, kind, and they're sweet, And when they talk to you, all you want to do is talk back to them. You want to keep the conversation going. That's spirit fruit. And they're tasting the flavor of God just dripping off of your life. If you've given God permission to cultivate you, to tend to the soil, to prune you, to prop you up when a branch is weak, to water you when you're dry, to fertilize the soil when it needs more nutrition. If you've given God permission to continue that cultivating work, they're going to keep putting out that spirit fruit that is so sweet and good that when people around you, that may be just the rudest, nastiest, angriest people you've met. We've all met those people. People you think there's no way they'll ever come to church, let alone get to know Christ. They think it's just a load of hooey. Let the fruit speak for itself. Let the sweetness in your life drip from their lips when they're around you. Because of what God has been doing in your life. Are we intentionally pairing that intimate relationship with the choices we make, the actions we do? We'll see that proof in the fruit we're producing, and so will everyone else around us. If I want to know where I'm at in my walk with Christ, all I got to do is ask my wife. I can delude myself all day long. But someone like my wife, who knows me better than anyone else, would be able to tell me straight up, James, you're doing well at this. Not so well at that. The fruit will be evident. Is it sour fruit? Is it rotten fruit? Or is it sweet? Is it fun and juicy? Is it good fruit? If we want that fruitfulness, let us recommit like we've done before. Let us recommit now to giving God permission to cultivate in us. There's more fruitfulness He intends for us. There are more lives that need to be touched. There are people in this world that only we can reach. And if we give God permission to continually work the soil and prune the branches, we'll be putting out that fruit that when those people taste it, they're going to be drawn to the goodness of God. It will be irresistible. We may not see the end result of them accepting Christ and becoming disciples, but we'll be part of that process of them tasting something so different from the bitterness they've had. Something so shockingly good that they can't help but say, okay, all of this that I've been eating all my life, all these things that I've been doing, all of this trouble I've been having to wade through, I don't want that anymore. My challenge is to recommit. It's painful. But when you see the fruit, and when you see the look in someone's eye because they've tasted the goodness of God from your life, you know instantly it's worth it. Pray. Father God, thank you for your word that brings life to our lives. Thank you for your word that's not some dead text that we're studying in a class and we have to memorize it, but it's your very words to us to get to know you. You've given us in your word this image of a gardener cultivating his crops, looking for fruitfulness. We understand that, Lord, because it's an image that we've all known in our own lives. Lord, we lay ourselves in your hands, and we ask for your cultivating work. Dig in our soil. Prune our branches. Water us. Fertilize us, so that we can be fruitful with spirit fruit that is good, is loving and kind and gentle and merciful, and patient and faithful, so that others, Lord, can taste that fruit and be drawn to your goodness through us. Help us not forget there are always people that you want us to be able to reach with the sweetness that you put in our lives. We lay ourselves in your hands for this work. And we invite you. We beg you. Do it, Lord. Be our gardener. We are your garden. And we thank you for this in Jesus' name.